Winning the 2008 WSOP Horse event was one of the proudest achievements of my life. After watching on ESPN, I know my actions at the table were wrong. For that, I would like to apologize to everyone, especially the fans. I make a big mistake. One I am very, very sorry for, and one I never repeat and never forget. I am sorry to all, Scotty Nguyen. I wanted to get that out of the way, just get that to begin with, before we talk about the actions that led to such an apology. I am East Coast Sam for short. You can find me on Poker Stars, not Party Poker anymore because their customer service stinks.
And I'm Legend of Ben on Poker Stars, or just calling Ben. And we are here to discuss what is effectively part 2 of the Scotty Nguyen trilogy of poker drama. We had discussed at length Scotty Nguyen's poker, his antics in the 2007 main event, where he finished 11th place after having an infamous blow-up, particularly against Mr. Philip Hilm. And kind of building on that sort of momentum, both good and bad, we find ourselves at the 2008...
Can't even finish that, I'm sorry.
It's okay. The 2008 H.O.R.S.E event, the poker, the 50K, basically the Poker Players Championship, it wasn't called that at this point in time yet, but the third of its kind, where the first year was Chip Reese taking the trophy, and this really kind of served as a memorial tournament to Chip Reese.
Yep, I mean, this was an event that got a lot of publicity. There was something like 144 players. Is that the exact number?
148.
148 players, almost $2 million up top, with second place getting something like $1.25 million, something like that.
Yeah, big bucks.
I mean, this was supposed to be like, this was being broadcast on ESPN. This was supposed to be a big, serious, great event to honor Chip Reese, who was one of the most beloved figures in poker, at least at the time, and probably still is to a great extent. The Hall of Fame has a rule. It's called the Chip Reese rule, that you have to be older than 40 years old in order to make the Hall of Fame. So Chip Reese will always be the youngest person to ever make it in. Incredibly well-respected guy, a gentleman of the game. Everybody seemed to love him. And then ... We'll just explain what happens.
Well, the big thing here, we've been normally covering the main events, but each main event has progressively had more and more episodes documented the entire tournament. So I felt that given the size of the 08 coverage, it was only fitting to kind of have a special little episode of the podcast in between to kind of bridge the gap.
And this is probably the most infamous WSOP event of all of them, I think. Certainly one of the most infamous
of the non-main events. Maybe the one drop, maybe, but that's a big if. But besides that, this is definitely, at least to me, the most memorable non-main event tournament of all time.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I mean, it's been 13 years later. I mean, there have been so many compilations made about this, all different YouTube accounts. Poker Go published their video, which has only been out for, I think, a couple months or so, and it's got hundreds of thousands of views on it. I mean, it's crazy just how notorious this particular tournament is.
And this is definitely a snapshot into the poker scene at the time.
Yeah,
a lot of pros, some pros still relevant to this day in this coverage. Some passed away, and some no longer really in the main swing of things in the poker scene. This is the H.O.R.S.E event, which is a rotation of 5 poker games: Hold'em, Omaha 8, Raz, Stud, and Stud 8 or better. Very different from no-limit Hold'em. Here we have limits, and they don't refer to it as big bets, but nowadays these are commonly referred to as big bet games. And the final table is of the final 8 players: Eric Lindgren, Scotty Nguyen, Barry Greenstein, Mac Lance, Lyle Berman, Michael D. McKelly, and H.O.R.S.E. And also some guy named Bueno. Who doesn't play very Bueno in this coverage.
I mean, but this is like a star-studded final table. I mean, even Dean McKelly, they mentioned in the coverage, had already made a final table. He was sort of seen as one of the more promising young guns, at least in mixed games at the time.
Kind of the classic young gun versus seasoned pro kind of narratives.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a murderer's row. I mean, it's incredible that all these play. They mentioned, Negrani was playing this. Phil Ivey had a deep run in this. Like there were so many star-studded players in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is definitely kind of still the height of the poker boom.
Yeah.
Kind of still kind of a pros amateur poker mentality.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more than any other coverage I've seen, this kind of captures the snootiness or kind of arrogance or kind of ego of the game that these pros kind of have towards how the game should be played.
Oh yeah.
And we'll see that in effect in the events to come, as well as kind of some contradictory behavior at the same time.
You betcha. Oh my God.
And a key thing is this is the style of coverage still very similar to 2007.
Yeah.
With the graphics. The biggest difference is they do a very brief sort of rule summary of each game, how it's played. They very, very quickly move through it because they have to get to a lot of stuff in a hurry. So a brief refresh of the rules. When I was younger, first watching this, I was still kind of confused by games like Raz.
Yeah, me too.
And also the percentages, because for the games that can have a split pot, you would have to figure out the high and the low side of the hand and how the percentile factors out. It's a little confusing unless you really know what you're watching.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they do a brief explanation of the graphics on the screen, like in Stud High Low. They mention very briefly, the yellow graphic means the low hand, the blue graphic means the high ground, or it's the other way around or something. But, you're still very confused about it. Also, they don't really show the bet sizes for those games. I guess there's just too many graphics on the screen to show the bet sizes for each hand, and you don't really understand how the bet sizes progress within a single hand. I wish they'd sort of laid out the structure of that a bit better. One thing that we were also confused about is how exactly the levels worked. How many hands per game that there were. I think there were 8 hands per game is what we eventually decided on, but they weren't really clear about that information in terms of moving from game to game.
Yeah, and even in the editing, I mean, we see the games rotate and the blinds or stakes gradually up, but with no real acknowledgement of how regularly they're doing that.
Exactly, yeah.
However, oddly enough, I did look up how many hands the entire final table was, and it was 314 hands.
Wow.
And which is took them about 13 hours of play.
Mm-hmm.
And if you factor in 5 games, 8 hands per game per level, that's 40 per level. So that's really about 8 levels of blinds in total, which I think actually works out, given that the stakes, I believe, begin at like 80K and 160K.
Yeah, something like
and
that.
They end around like 160K and 320K, so that about checks out if you kind of count it up like that.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly with this final table, they actually split the action into 2 episodes, which really gives some time for the drama to breathe and also give each game a fairly decent showing so that it wasn't so heavily focusing on one of the 5 games in the horse rotation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of players, even today, aren't that familiar with Raz or Stud. I mean, Poker Stars now barely has any, sit and goes or tournaments beyond Hold'em. So it's nice that they do give some time for that.
Yeah, personally, with me, of course, I was very proficient at some horse games on Poker Stars.
Yeah.
I did find a lot of people misplaying, especially in the O.R.E. In the H.O.R.E, of course, they really misplayed, and in those I really took advantage of them. I'm probably Stud. Playing Stud is my weakest game of the 5, if I had to pick one.
I'd say, maybe Omaha for me. I love Horse and I love 8-game mix. 8-game mix I prefer over Horse because, Stud is something I'm a little bit weaker at. 8-game mix, you have a little bit more variety in there and you move through the games more individually. But I remember watching this and being like, oh, Horse, that seems kind of interesting, and that sort of helped me feed my interest into it. I would say I'm a better Horse player than a no-limit Hold'em player, frankly.
I think you're right, because you're a very tight player and you can really kind of pick your spots and put your money in more confidently in a game where you can only lose so much money if you play a hand a certain way. But I talked about the 8 players at the final table. Episode 1 takes us from 8 players down to 3.
Yep.
And really, this is kind of a Michael D. McKelly kind of focused episode because he starts off this episode, and I think in 6th place on the chip count. And he really makes some big hands, makes some big plays, and really jumps up the chip count. during this portion of the final table. On the very first hand, we lose the shortest stack, Mr. Bueno, and I feel bad for him because they don't show the chip count until after he busts out, so he just doesn't even get to have his name on the big screen
That's
with all the chip counts. So he loses, and then they show the 7 remaining players and their chip stacks to start the final table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we get some jokes at first from Lon and Norm about they play Raz in Hell. That's good for me, Lon. Little stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, the first big hand isn't with Mr. Bueno. It's with D. McKelly versus Barry, who does a little interesting move on 6th Street in a stud hand.
Mm-hmm.
So Barry bets out. D. McKelly kind of sits there for, I don't think they mentioned in the coverage how long, and I couldn't find in the write-up how long it was, but sits there for a little while, then raises, which everyone's like, ooh, that's kind of, Lon and Norm even say, like, that's kind of weird. Barry calls, goes to 7th Street. D. McKelly wins the hand, and then we get the first infamous moment from the coverage, which is he rubs his hands as though he's, like, warming his hands up to knead some dough or something, and then he rakes in the pot. And then we get comments from, I think it's H.O.R.S.E, and
yes.
He's talking to somebody else, and he goes, oh man, it's so brutal that he studied for so long. The celebration afterward made it even more brutal. I'm just going to say it right now, right? D. McKelly was in his early 20s when he was doing this. He's playing for $2 million up against some of the best players in the world. Let the guy celebrate.
Especially since, Hollywooding is a separate matter from celebration.
Mm-hmm.
The Hollywood can, I think those moments kind of help the pros out because it makes a player rather more easy to read. And Barry Greenstein should have probably folded. I thought it was pretty obvious from the Hollywood that it was a fold at that point. Now, in limit games, it's obviously a little bit harder to fold because the odds you get to make a call and you kind of you can max out how much you lose in any given hand, but I think the pros shouldn't have complained about the Hollywood for that reason. It makes their poker games probably easier.
Yeah.
And then the celebration, it was of noiseless. It was a quiet celebration. He didn't get up from his seat and like run out to the crowd or anything. I think it was a totally fair game celebration.
Yeah.
Compared to say Mr. Havad Khan, it's like it's not even comparable of a celebration.
Perhaps the pros saw Havad Khan the previous year, and that kind of just made them wary of all celebrations in general.
There was the Havad Khan rule would have been in effect at this point.
Yeah.
But in no way was D. McKelly's celebration excessive in any stretch of the word.
Yeah, no. He's got a rail behind him who's, again, mainly his age, his family, his friends. They're all cheering and celebrating for him. He wants to join with them. He wants to create a communal experience with them, and I think it's fair for him to stand up and do that.
And, I feel like maybe the angle they're going for is like dishonoring Chip Reese, but Chip Reese seems like a happy guy. He might have been happy from D. McKelly to celebrate like that. They don't know that.
Yeah, they even show, like, Chip Reese winning the final hand of the horse tournament. He's, like, throwing up his arms, and he's, like, greeting the crowd and stuff, kind of similar to D. McKelly. Like, this is totally permissible behavior in any sport. In tennis, it's okay.
And it's ironic that it's H.O.R.S.E criticizing him because he's the shirt stack at this point. He's like, probably has some chip envy or something.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, D. McKelly only adds fuel to the fire when he bluffs off Lyle Berman in a hand and kind of makes a woohoo to the crowd. Kind of goes woohoo to the crowd, and again, it's an audible celebration of sorts, but it's definitely in no way rubbing it in someone's face. He's just kind of being himself.
Right. He said that he needed that one. The emphasis was on, him, that the hand. He wasn't like making fun of Lyle Berman. He wasn't mocking his play or anything. I think it's okay to breathe a sigh of relief after you win a hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then H.O.R.S.E kind of gets some karmic resolution here. He goes out against D. McKelly, where, again, I think H.O.R.S.E just totally misplayed this hand against D. McKelly. He puts in the rest of it. I know you're short stack, but in a horse game, you can really kind of just hang on a little bit longer if you need to.
Right.
And he ultimately goes out, and D. McKelly misreads or miscalls his hand at Showdown when the cards are all dealt, which either hand that he called out would have been good. So it's not even like it was all that big a deal in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
And particularly in stud, you have 7 cards. You have to kind of keep track of things. I don't think any less of D. McKelly for accidentally doing that.
Yeah, I mean, again, either way, his hand would have been good. And immediately after, Huckseed says, "Oh, you have a flush." D. McKelly's, he apologizes. He shakes Huckseed's hand, says you played well.
Yeah,
totally respectful guy.
absolutely,
just absolutely, innocent mistake.
Absolutely. And with that hand, D. McKelly jumps up into 3rd place on the chip count.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very strong start for him. And to his credit, he was playing pretty good. He was getting paid off by players with worse hands and making a better hand fold. So that's really all you need to do in poker, right?
Absolutely.
You got to play the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we do see, as will be kind of a pattern in the later years of the main event, they kind of show winners of previous bracelet events, characters that we'd recognize.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, Dario Manieri and Kenny Tran, who are both very prominent figures in the 07 main events.
Yeah.
They win in a bracelet, which is kind of nice to see that these people weren't just one-hit wonders.
Absolutely,
in the main events.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, years and years down the line, the main event, I'm always kind of bored by those sort of segments later on, but I appreciated this one at the very least, since I did know who these 2 players were.
Yeah, I actually forgot that Dario won a bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
Good for him.
Yeah. And, Scotty Nguyen has not been featured in this episode. We're 1/3 into the episode 1 of the 2-part final table. He's not been on screen really at all yet. And he kind of eases us into what will be a pattern of rude, awful, and unethical behavior in a hand against Barry Greenstein. He kind of slow rolls Greenstein. It's weird because Scotty Nguyen on 7th Street on, I believe was it Stud or is it Raz? I think it was Stud. It was
Stud, yeah.
It was Stud.
Mm-hmm.
He looks at his last card, which is dealt face down to the player in Stud, and he kind of looks at it enough that he can't really see the card with 100% accuracy.
Right.
So when Greenstein tables his hand, Scotty Nguyen's it's 50-50. It's either like a 3 or 7 or an 8 or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a 7 to make trip 7s to win and bust Barry Greenstein. But it was a weird kind of is this the beer talking moment for Scotty?
Yeah, it was very odd, and Lon and Norm made a comment about it. I mean, I think that's a little excessive. I think that behavior.
But the problem is that the rest of the table doesn't really know exactly what happened. We can only piece it all together because we saw the whole cam and kind of conceal the cards and how that would have worked. But the table's kind of unaware at this point still of what Scotty was.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of the table isn't aware of it, but I still think, he calls a guy's all in and then just kind of slow rolls like that. I can understand, waiting for Barry Greenstein to flip over his cards and then flipping over yours, so that way you can muck if he has you beat. That's fine.
Yeah.
But having a whole speech about it, waiting several seconds, and yeah, for sure, Scotty Nguyen, is polite afterward and shakes Barry Greenstein's hand. Barry Greenstein gives Scotty his book, but even Barry, just as he's signing the book, doesn't really seem too thrilled with it. He doesn't say anything, but I don't think he was entirely happy with what just happened there.
Granted, he did just bust in the horse event, though, so how happy would you be?
Yeah.
And then, so with Greenstein being eliminated, that leaves 5 players.
Mm-hmm.
D. McKelly, he wins the next hand. He kind of does another one, just look back he shakes, celebrations, and a big pain, which jumps him into the chip lead at this point.
Yeah.
Again, it's a little kiddish, but he's a kid compared to these other guys, and also he's not rubbing it in anyone's face. He's not
exactly.
And by now they have seen him kind of do this a few times, so they shouldn't care as much, or they should just kind of roll with it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's totally, again, maybe if it was me, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I have no problem with him doing it.
Yeah, again, he's a kid playing for $2 million. Why not let him celebrate? Why not let him get emotional so that if he loses a pot or something, he becomes distressed or something? Why not play into it in some capacity?
Mm-hmm. We do get a lovely little Scotty yelling "cocktails" moment.
Oh yeah.
At this point, Scotty seems to like to refer to beer as cocktails for some reason. I'm not a drinker, so I don't know the slang or how people handle that. But
and Lindgren says, "Let's get some beers, Scotty," and even tips the dealer, which is an interesting little foreshadowing, a precursor to what happens later with Lindgren. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
Everyone's happy. Everyone's amiable.
Mm-hmm. But then Eric kind of, for probably the only time in the whole entire final table, kind of puts a little dig into D. McKelly for his post-win bows. Like, maybe I'll take a bow now. Like, he kind of, like, makes fun of McKelly for the fact that he's having all these kind of post-hand, when he wins, kind of bows to the crowd. But again, I think Lindgren is out of line, kind of talking. I mean, maybe talking him away from the table or something, but not just like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he was relatively polite about it. He did say, like, you know, take a bow. You know, we don't really do that as professionals. You know, he wasn't like, you know, making fun of the kids screaming at him or anything. And D. McKelly, to his credit, says, "All right, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yes.
You know, I can understand that this isn't good. I'm going to stop doing that."
And it's not the first time McKelly will say that during this final table. And Lindgren, this also kind of really sent to as Lindgren began as a chip leader. The final table wasn't really going his way up to that point, so maybe it's a little bit of sour grapes there too. But that's really, you know, we're not mind readers here.
Right, exactly.
And then we do have another segment here about Scotty Nguyen and his 07 meltdown. They referred to him kind of as being like chip leader, but I don't think he was quite chip leader at any point.
I think he was second or so.
I think he was like top 3, but he was not first because he was like 17 million at his peak. There was some at 20 million, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a huge meltdown, but I think it's important to get those details right.
Of course, yeah. And I did know that, you know, last time on the episode, I did say that the final table is the softest final table of the ones we've seen. I still stand by that opinion, but I just want to say for the record, all right, all the players seem to be nice guys.
Yes.
All the players, to make the final table the main event, you have to do something right. You have to be doing something right to get there. But, you know, they all would beat me heads up if I had a 10-1 chip lead on them. So I just want to say for the record, they're not bad people. I just think that it was overall the softest final table of the 5. But they're good guys, and I don't want to come across as too harsh. Okay.
You did say that you thought that if Scotty Nguyen had like 10 million at the final table, he would have won the whole thing.
I think if he was.
I feel like maybe Jerry Yang gets under Scotty Nguyen's skin. You never know. Maybe he pulls a helmet on him. You never know.
True. Just wanted to get that off my chest. I felt a little guilty saying that.
I mean, no one beat you up on it in our comment section for that. So I wouldn't worry about that too much.
All right, sure thing.
And then we do get another very talky Scotty Nguyen hand in Raz against Lyle Berman. Lyle Berman makes a kind of a foolish-ish bet, and Scotty Nguyen says, "I rolled up," and puts out a raise when Scotty has the hand board locked down, 100% won.
Yep.
And Lyle Berman like kind of plays into Scotty Nguyen's talk when Scotty claims that he began on the Favicon in Raz, which is really awful. And again, this is the first kind of real like prime hand in the Scotty Nguyen belligerent drunk montage of hands to come.
Yeah, I mean, this is the beginning of the end, but still, he's not too rude at this point. He's not making fun of Lyle Berman. He's laughing more so than anything else. So we're still, at this point, I
disagree there, because at the end of the hand he says, I wrote this, I can't even call it. He does refer to Lyle.
Okay, that's fair.
He does kind of throw a little needle in there.
I still wouldn't say we've crossed the line yet.
It didn't cross the line, but it was definitely the first little, one of those
beginning of the end.
Japanese ninja throwing needles being thrown across the table. And then there's another hand with Scotty Nguyen versus D. McKelly versus Lyle Berman. Berman ends up going all in with the worst of the 3 hands. Scotty Nguyen ends up with 3 aces in Ras. Very annoyed at D. McKelly. How did I get 3 aces? Oh, come on. And McKelly takes a huge hand and the chip lead at that point.
Oh, God, yeah.
And at the end of the hand, Nguyen actually yells at D. McKelly, "You never see me? Yup, yeah!" You ever see me do that? And D. McKelly does a nod to his out of line earlier, which, again, he's just, I think, again, I have no problem with it. I'm not a pro, so maybe I don't get it. But, again, D. McKelly does kind of apologize and say he was wrong now a second time, so I feel like that should have been water under the bridge at this point.
Yep, I mean, that should have been the end of it. I mean, Scotty, this is where Scotty, to me, starts to cross the line. He says, you know how fucking sick you are. You know, he's making fun of D. McKelly now. And, you know, D. McKelly seems very hurt by, like, a little hurt and stunned by the exchange. He says, like, I thought we were cool, man. You know, there's an aggressive tone and aggressive feel starting to filter into the tournament.
Absolutely. As the table shrinks, the tension obviously goes up, and so does the conflict.
But I don't think that justifies, you know, saying the F word to another player or something.
And again, I mean, there's supposed to be like a language rule of this.
Oh yeah.
At the World Series of Poker rate, so I'm surprised maybe for the final table they went up on it, or for the PPC they did that. I don't know.
I mean, Scotty should have gotten like 6 penalties over the course of this entire final table. Supposedly, the only time that Scotty ever got close to getting a penalty was when he was talking basically collusion, saying, to Lindgren, let's play heads up. I'm keeping you in the tournament, which we'll get to in a moment.
Yes.
But the fact that there was no rules administered against him is just. I understand it's Scotty Nguyen.
Well, they didn't penalize Jamie Gold either. I feel like this is kind of like they have to cross the goalpost before they move it back.
I still think you got to crack down on this, and you got to administer a penalty when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if it's the final table. I don't care if it's Scotty Nguyen. You got to actually, if Scotty Nguyen is above the rules, I mean that's just.
Well, I mean, what's more above the rules than flashing your cards to the crowd above your head?
Oh my god.
Scotty Nguyen, playing stud against Dean McKelly, he takes his 3 face down cards instead. 4 face up, 3 face down. He flashes them to the crowd. See this, baby? You see that? You see that? That's a join, baby. I mean, that's just completely inappropriate, and it's not quite breaking the 1 player per hand rule. I think it's 1 crowd per hand at that point. Granted, that doesn't really change much in the action of the hand, even though I think Dean McKelly probably should have folded.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Dean McKelly even says, if you're going to show the cards, the audience the cards, that's awesome. Lindgren's laughing at, it seems like...
It's a whole new ballgame. Wow.
Yeah, it seems like everyone at the table's fine with it. And I think from an entertainment perspective, it's funny. I mean, it's funny and it's enjoyable.
I agree, but I'm rooting for Dean McKelly at this point, so I'm not happy to see it's going to win.
Yeah, I'm rooting for Dean McKelly, too, at this point. I'm sorry, but jeez.
And then we see a quick chip count again. Dean McKelly's trying to win, both way, way ahead of the rest. There's about 15 million chips in play, and they have a combined 13.5 million. Yep. Matt Glantz not shown the entire time, which is surprising because I looked this up. That the hand he busts on and to go out in 4th place was hand number 125.
Wow. So
of the 314 hands, that's a little under halfway. But nonetheless, Matt Glantz, no love for him. He goes out in rather embarrassing, kind of bizarre fashion to trying to win. Probably the funniest line for me from trying to win, though, during this final table is, "You call me? What does 4th place pay?"
It's such a badass line. Oh my god.
And then, of course, trying to win high-five, middle of the hand. And Norm, of course, with the... It's going to happen in the middle of the hand. Wasn't just lecturing to McKelly about that?
He gets a lucky turn card and he just starts applauding like, oh my god.
I mean, it's pretty funny stuff, but Norm does point out the hypocrisy of it, and then he also gives a scolding to Dean McKelly afterwards, like, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, the episode ends with Scotty pulling Dean McKelly aside, maybe while they were setting up for him to play or something, and he's like, just can't leave it alone. He's lecturing Dean McKelly after he just knocked out Matt Glantz, clapping and, giving high fives. Very strange.
So basically, this episode is kind of the appetizer of Scotty Nguyen's sort of antics, with Dean McKelly kind of being the hors d'oeuvres.
Right.
Even though I think the pros showed a lot of disrespect with his behavior, I thought there was nothing wrong with it. I would have loved to hear about someone like Daniel Negreanu and what he thought about that, because he is a bit more involved in part 2 from the sidelines, and versus Mr. Lane Flack, rest in peace. But
oh wow, yeah.
That's a little bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, in case you don't know this, everybody in the poker world is watching this tournament happen from the sidelines. I mean, everybody's in here and everybody's getting shit faced too. So.
Yes. And so I think before we get into our second half of this final table, I think it's important to give a shout out to the recently deceased Norm MacDonald.
Yep, I've been a fan of his since Fairly Odd Parents, when he did. He was the genie on Fairly Odd Parents.
Norm the genie, yeah.
Yeah, and I got into his work over the last few years. He obviously was involved in the poker scene. Had I think one deep run and one WSOP event or something like that. Cashed a couple other times. Apparently,
and again, did have a couple of more than cameo appearances on some of the last couple of main events, 05, 06, 07 or so.
Yeah, and then he was, I think he was the commentator, was it High Stakes Poker or something? I can't remember, some poker show.
I think the last season of High Stakes Poker, he replaced Gabe Kaplan.
Yeah, and I mean, he was one of my favorite comics of all time. Not even so much for his stand-up comedy, but just his late-night talk show appearances on Conan. He did this radio show. It's the Sarah and Vinny Show, in which for 30 minutes straight, he just pretended to be the most nihilistic, death-seeking person on the entire planet. If you at all, are interested in Norm MacDonald stuff, you gotta listen to this. Like, it's just hilarious. He was on this YouTube awards show, and he was with Jenny Slate and a bunch of other comedians, and he just made fun of the event the entire time. He came dressed in sweatpants. He would read his lines off of a sheet of paper, and when he wasn't in a bit, he would just stare directly into the camera. The guy just did not give a fuck. Awesome comic. I mean, I've been watching his stuff for just incessantly for the last week. So great talent.
Poker gets the reputation as kind of being an old man's game.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're covering poker that is 15, 16, 17 years old at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, you wouldn't expect every player featured to still be alive, but we have lost some, important figures in the poker scene recently. Lane Flack died recently.
Yeah.
Norm MacDonald, of course, not as prominent, but still relevant to our coverage of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other players, Darvin Moon, Jack Urey, no longer with us, and we're hoping that we will run into talking about players that will still be playing to this day to kind of see how they've progressed from years ago to modern poker. But we'll definitely miss Norm MacDonald for sure.
Yeah.
But we're dedicating this special episode of our Two Fish at the Table podcast to him.
Yeah.
And we hope you guys can check out his work, because it's some very underrated comedic material.
Yep, and donate to cancer research if you can. He passed away from leukemia, I believe, which he had 9 years ago. He was undiagnosed. He was diagnosed, but he kept his diagnosis a secret from the public. So, if there's anything you can do to contribute to that cause, that'd be great.
And if anybody has any, special MacDonald moments or, memories, by all means, give us a shout in the comments, or give us let us know on our Facebook page, and we'll be happy to feature it on our next episode of the 08 main event podcast episode going forward later this fall.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that about covers our thoughts on Norm. I think we should move on to our other Norm, Norm and Chad, and episode 2 of the H.O.R.S.E event, which is the final 3, Lindgren, D. McKelly, and Nguyen playing down to a winner.
Yep, the greatest WSOP fucking episode of all time. Oh my god, I love this one.
And the chip counts at the very start. Lindgren has 10% of the chips, not even, of second place. D. McKelly is trying to win slightly ahead of D. McKelly. Now with these limit games, it's very easy to kind of have these swings where you go up and down and down and up. So even if you're low in chips, you can still one hand put yourself back in the swing of things. Or in Eric Lindgren's case, Scotty Nguyen gift wraps you a lot of chips to keep you alive in the game. One of the biggest focal points of poker controversy is the whole table talk rules that have been a part of the main event for a while. And supposedly the number one reason for that is to prevent collusion. And you have to wonder if this first hand here is the origin of that rule being created, because Scotty Nguyen basically folds a superior hand to Lindgren in Omaha 8, and basically verbalizes out loud, "Just for my boy, I'm going to keep him alive. I'm going to go the other way just for him." And gift wraps Lindgren $200,000 chips, which is one big bet, which is a substantial amount of chips in a H.O.R.S.E event. Mm-hmm. And apparently an effort to keep Lindgren alive so that he can get to heads up versus Scotty Nguyen versus D. McKelly and making it to heads up, which is just absolute garbage.
Even Lindgren's shocked by it. He had a pair of queens, which still a good hand with that board, but I just can't. There were 2 jacks on the board, right? So does Lindgren have 3 jacks? Is that in his range? I guess so, but I doubt it.
Scotty had no low draws. Lindgren did, so I guess you can look at it that way. I guess, but nonetheless, he folds and shows the aces face up.
Yeah.
And just says, "I had you, right, baby?" It's just absolutely unacceptable. There's no penalty. There's no tournament director intervention. D. McKelly doesn't say anything, even though I think he did grasp what was happening. He saw it.
You had to.
So, ridiculous.
Crazy. Just crazy.
And again, it's merely the appetizer of this episode, because there's a lot more to come.
Oh, yeah.
Because the very next hand, he loses in a bizarre ace-3 versus ace-4 in limit hold'em hand. I don't know if it was the next hand, but no, it couldn't have been because that was Omaha 8 and that was limit hold'em.
Mm-hmm.
But an ace-3, ace-4 hand where the 4 kicker from Dean McKelly actually plays miraculously. And not only does Scotty Nguyen bet the wrong size on the river, he bets the small bet size, not the big bet size. When Dean McKelly raises and he calls, Scotty yells, "Where's the cocktail, man? Where's this man play? Let's go wait forever." Like he wants more alcohol, as if that's his problem right now.
Yeah, I mean, Dean McKelly takes it in, very graciously. He says, "Wow, he knows he got lucky with runner there."
Yes.
And then Scotty just flips out.
And just a horrible start for Scotty, who had a chip win to start the episode. And as the heads-up three-handed play goes on, we actually see Eric Lindgren rise from third place into first place. Which just shows you how crazy these swings can really go.
Yeah.
And Scotty Nguyen obviously taking note of this because Nguyen tells him, "Dean McKelly, you got a horse you stuck up your butts." And then Dean McKelly kind of fires back saying that Scotty has a great ring game skills, but heads up game, I'm not so sure.
Which is brilliant needle. Oh my God.
It's kind of low key. It's not, he's not yelling, he's not swearing. Dean McKelly is probably sober at this point. I mean, I don't think he's going to complicate his game by drinking. And Scotty Nguyen he's a firecracker, as Norm says.
Yeah, I mean, Dean McKelly says something to the effect of, "I thought you were an ambassador to poker. I'm disappointed in you, Scotty." Like
before, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just crazy. I mean, wow.
And Norm sort of defends Dean McKelly's early antics by saying they're not nearly as bad as what Scotty has been. But I don't think. I mean, again, I think it's a minor blip, if anything, on the radar, whereas Scotty is completely out of line.
Yeah.
And then Scotty's little helper in the crowd, Mr. Lane Flack, kind of gets into the action a bit. So he starts getting drunk and getting loud and saying, "What's that, baby?"
And Scotty's actually turning around in the middle of action, looking into the crowd, talking to Lane Flack, which is just funny. Oh my God.
We do actually get the nuts segment here on what poker player would you be for 24 hours, and pretty much the main crux of the group interviewed say Ivy, Joel Brunson, or Gus Hansen.
And Phil Helmuth says that he'd like to be himself.
Of course.
It's classic.
Captain Ego. Captain Ego. And then, Exhibit B in the collusion case of 08, Scotty Nguyen versus the world. Scotty basically yells at Lindgren because Scotty makes a raise to a 300 pot, and he's upset because I raised to protect your hand, and you come out on fire. Scotty Nguyen dumps a ton of chips over to Dean McKelly because he's trying to get Dean McKelly to fold so that Lindgren and him would split the other part of the pots. And it backfires miserably because both of them send a million chips each over to Dean McKelly.
It's just so weird. I just don't. It's explicit. We're not. When we're quoting Scotty here, right? We're not paraphrasing what he did or paraphrasing what he said. This is what he said.
Exactly.
I just don't understand. Was Jack Effel just asleep at the wheel? What was he doing?
I have no idea.
I just don't get it.
I agree. And then the next hand, once again, Nguyen rubs a win in Dean McKelly's face when he said, "You must be sick. A check raise on the turn." Hey, Lane, I said I got ace high. He raised me. Is that what you think I said? I had ace high? I got nothing.
It's so weird.
I mean, it's kind of a standard limit hold'em hand. Ace high, rivers a pair versus top pair. And,
yeah.
And Scotty Nguyen, again, he wins a hand, laughs, and he can't even, that's just, oh man.
It's just so bad.
And then the very next hand we see is the infamous nut, baby. Don't you know what nut mean, baby? Lane Flack says, "What's up, baby? You can fuck around with me?" Scotty rubbing it, and Lane almost spits out his beer in response to that line.
Oh man!
And then Lane actually comes out onto the table and fist bumps Scotty Nguyen, which Lindgren actually told the director not Jack Effel, but a different director,
right, yeah.
To tell him not to do it anymore. So now this is where Lindgren is firmly on Dean McKelly. So things have shifted so much that Lindgren, his earlier sort of scolding of Dean McKelly is gone.
Totally gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just incredible. In a few hours, how your opinion can switch like that. Wow.
And this is no better amplified than in the next hand where Scotty calls Lindgren a card rack, Correct. No. You haven't seen me look at it yet. You would never be that. And then he says you wouldn't be here this long if I wasn't nice. Which is again just kind of past confirmation of his actions of collusion earlier in the final table.
This is crazy.
And then Lindgren kind of fires back. You better never get even. Never get even. That's right, baby. Scotty Nguyen responds as the camera cuts to Dee McKelly, which is just it's a great kind of not duology but trilogy of.
It's such a great edit. It just cuts to Dee McKelly, and I think Norm says something to the effect of like, Dee McKelly's out of harm's way or something, which is just hilarious.
Temporarily for the moment, yeah.
Yeah. And then Lindgren, who earlier had been laughing with Scotty's antics, really joyous with it, says, I ain't on Team Scotty, never have been, never will be. What do you think of that? And Scotty goes, you think I give a shit?
I don't give a
It's so crazy. Like, oh my god.
And then Lindgren, hung around as a short stack for as long as he could, but ultimately he goes busto, and he kind of exclaims to the crowd, sometimes I can't beat a drunk. And then he goes over to McKelly and says, beat him, make Chip proud, which is a nice little moment here.
Yep.
And then, then it goes from the serious to the funny, where he leaves Lane Flack's high five hanging, and he goes over to give Dan Granu kind of a I'm out of the tournament hug kind of moment. And that was hand number 303 of the final table. So at this point, heads up, Dee McKelly down 6-1, so Scotty Nguyen kind of was siphoning all the chips by this point in the three-handed play.
Yeah.
And again, it's about like $12.5 million to $2.6 million, kind of that ballpark of chip stacks. And heads-up play lasts for about 11 or 12 hands.
Yep.
But we only actually see 2 hands of the heads-up play.
Yep. And unlike the main event coverage where the challenger gets a win and then we see the actual winner of the main event win a hand, it's actually just both Scotty with a pretty incredible penultimate hand that we see with Scotty screaming, brick this,
brick this, Bricky, break this. Dee McKelly makes a terrible bet on 7th Street.
Yeah.
Scotty Nguyen raises with the 2 pair of things up, and that really cripples Dee McKelly at that point. He only lasts 2 more hands, 1 hand in between that hand and the final hand of the whole heads-up play.
You heard your boy say brick, right?
That's what I get.
Brick,
swear. A brick's a bad card, but Scotty's brick paired him. Like, Dee McKelly had a low draw, had a pair, and just a bad run out of cards for him. And then the very next hand, heads up and limit hold'em. Ace 3 against Ace 10. It's a kind of a cooler heads up and limit hold'em there with an ace. Scotty Nguyen, the cards run out. Scotty exclaims to the crowd, the only man.
Well, we gotta first off, as the hand begins, Scotty is stacking up his chips and goes, stack up my chips, gonna be all over. And Dee McKelly, being like a fairly good sport there after everything that just happened, he smiles a little bit, he goes, it's gonna be all over, baby, kind of as a joke.
It's gonna be all up, baby.
And then, Dee McKelly, says, I'm only 22, I don't deserve this bracelet, I guess I don't deserve it. And Scotty, with my favorite line of the entire tournament, no hesitation, completely serious, goes, you don't, baby. Just so mean.
I only say thank you when it's over.
And then it is over.
Yeah.
Scotty becoming the first person to win the main event and the H.O.R.S.E championship, which, pretty remarkable achievement.
I mean, this episode can only be divided into 2 halves. One is Scotty's drunk bad play to Eric Lindgren's benefit, and then it's just the Scotty Nguyen dynasty kicks in and sort of closes out the event with the win. Yeah,
there's one line I like from Norm at the end. Dee McKelly's just lost, and he waves into the camera and he goes, bye, America, and Norm goes, he's leaving the country. I always like that little line, but yeah.
I mean, this is, again, the most quotable episode ever. I literally had to hold back myself in this seat here to not just quote the whole thing, like verbatim from start to finish. In this recap, I mean,
so crazy. Oh my god, I wish I could write like this. Like, oh my god, it's so good.
I mean, drunk people usually make for entertaining television. Sometimes, I mean, I wouldn't personally engage in it, but as a television viewer, then it's very entertaining. This would kind of have some minor resolution in the main event coverage. We will cover it when we get there. But Scotty Nguyen is highlighted in the 08 main event coverage, and he does allude to his antics at this final table.
Mm-hmm.
The apology you read off earlier takes place further down the line chronologically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole separate matter at that point.
Yep.
And again, this is really the only final table besides maybe the Poker Players Championship I've really watched ever from the last 15 years of the World Series of Poker coverage.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple other tournaments. Like I remember I once watched Dutch Boyd's first bracelet. He was heads up against Joe Hashem, so that's why I watched it to see Joe Hashem play.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, this, as we started off by saying, I mean, this really is the most infamous WSOP event of all time. I mean, it's up there with like that EPT event that got robbed in 2008 or something. Like one of the most infamous in the tour. Yeah, do you not know about that?
I did not know that.
There was some EPT event, and it was happening live, and all of a sudden these like armed robbers like stormed the casino. I'm not kidding. It actually happened. There's footage of it.
Oh, wow.
I don't think anybody got hurt or anything, thankfully. But like it actually like interrupted the coverage. Like that, you see the feature table and they're playing, and then you just see people running in the background, and then the table's just bolts.
Wow,
it's strange, yeah. But yeah, like one of the most infamous poker tournaments of all time, probably the most hilarious of all time. Sorry, Chip Reese, wherever you are. Great player, great guy. Certainly did nothing to honor his memory or his legacy.
But even though this was kind of referred to as the Chip Reese tournament, this event kind of morphed into something new because this horse event would eventually become the Poker Players Championship, which would evolve to have more than just the 5 games in horse.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Michael Mizrachi, the grinder, who we briefly saw in the 2005 main event coverage, has won that event 3 times in the last I think like 10, 11 years.
Remarkable.
So it's really kind of his event at this point, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, and this was I think this was the most players in this event, the 08 version, the highest first place payout. I think only now it's like 1.2 million or something like that.
Well, I know that the World Series of Poker has adjusted how many players get paid out.
Yeah.
15% versus 10%, so that does change things a little bit considerably.
Yeah.
Not to mention, though, that a lot of these poker websites that were sponsoring these pros no longer really in the scene like that, so that's where a lot of these players would get their buy-ins from, so that could also affect things in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But, it's an event that, $50,000 is certainly not as much now with all the high roller events.
Yeah, of course.
But at the time, this was considered a very, very big volume event.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I mean, the main event was too, but I mean, this is 5 times that.
Crazy, yeah.
So again, it's a couple of very entertaining episodes. Definitely,
absolutely
would rank up there as far as individual episodes. It's among my favorites easily.
Yeah.
With the main event, obviously, you're gonna have individual episodes that stand up, but for the most part, none of them match the quality of these.
Yeah, I mean, the main event, I won't compare this necessarily to the main event because the main event we get, from day one onward. There's more time to tell stories, more time just because you have more episodes to show some of the smaller players and so on. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of hard to compare the two. Just in terms of sheer entertainment value, the lines that happened, just crazy hands and crazy plays, this is up there. Yeah,
absolutely.
Up there with the 07 final.
Now, I have to ask you, do you think who is more out of line with their behavior and antics? Jamie Gold in 06 or Scotty Nguyen here in 08?
I gotta go with Scotty because I feel like Scotty was swearing. He was actually like berating and yelling at players. Jamie never was rude to somebody else.
Maybe Eric Molina, but that's about it.
Yeah, and you can't really blame him for being rude.
Yes, and not to mention the collusion is worse than anything else. I know language is one thing. Now we're freedom to speak to this country after all, but collusion, like he was of Eric Lindgren, is completely ridiculous. And but flashing a card is really the worst thing Jamie Gold did. Right. And he was heads up in the hands. So.
Yeah, and it was very quick, and he didn't make a big gesture out of it, whereas Scotty's actually showing multiple sections of the audience his cards, laughing about it, calling attention to himself. I mean, I think what's the worst thing that Jamie Gold said? Maybe you got the balls to call me. Maybe that's the worst thing he said. Which I guess that's an insult.
He said I have top. He said what he had.
That's true, top, and I wouldn't have called you if I'd said top. You could argue that's kind of collusion there, I guess.
Yeah.
But again, it's I guess versus, I'm keeping you in. Yes. I'm folding aces to keep you in.
And I think we completely agree. Dean McKelly was not out of line
No.
compared to guys like Havad Khan or Barry Paskin or all these other very noisy, loud players. Definitely, totally in line with what I would be okay if I was a tournament director.
Yeah, I mean, it's been also 13 years since this, and we've seen a progression toward, just not saying anything whatsoever at the table, not showing
robotic
any emotions
poker
whatsoever.
personas. That would not be me, probably.
Yeah, I mean, this is really refreshing. This is nice to see 13 years back. I'm sure if Lindgren or so on could, see how the game has evolved to become less emotive with time, they'd be okay with it back then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
and really, from a historical perspective, these players featured. Matt Gallant is often considered the best player to never win a bracelet, which you have to wonder how good are you really if you aren't winning a bracelet.
Exactly.
Dean McKelly hasn't really. This is really kind of his only time in the spotlight, to my knowledge, in the poker scene.
Yeah.
Scotty Nguyen has never kind of matched the back-to-back kind of success that he did have in this sort of 07, 08 time frame.
Yeah.
But he, would still make a few more cashes in the main events. We'll see him in some of our future episodes of the main event coverage. Eric Lindgren, kind of like, the most modern degenerate gambler kind of type, divorce, debts, gambling debts. Just, he'll make a very deep run in that 2011 main event, but besides that, he's just kind of all over the place.
He's disappeared, yeah.
And Barry Greenstein still kind of in the scene. He no longer does the whole book signing on a full elimination in the tournament, which is too bad, but
I think so, yeah.
You gotta do what you gotta do. And everybody else, not really. Huck Seeds, gets notoriety for being a past champion who's still.
Yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. All right, and I think that kind of concludes our discussion here for this event.
Yep. I mean, we just, as Ben mentioned right at the start, we wanted to just do this as a quick little thing. Mentioned Norm MacDonald, of course, but this is, again, we had to talk about this, I think.
Absolutely.
And 08's 16 episodes or something.
19.
Like that. 19 episodes. I'm through with a few of them, so we'll try to get the next episode out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, we encourage our listeners to give us comments, questions, feedback, whatever. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to hear. Yeah. This is as much your show as it is our show, and we hope that as we approach the 2021 World Series of Poker, we see a lot of these faces back in the live poker scene,
Yeah.
And
both Ben and I will be following what happens. We'll try to watch as much of it as we can, and if there's something that we want to talk about, we'll bring it up. But we're really going to be more focused on, next episode we're going to be talking about the 08 WSOP, not so much this year's events, but if there's something that occurs that we want to talk about, we'll bring it up.
Especially if someone in the 08 main events is pertinent to the modern poker events.
Peter Eastgate comes out of retirement and wins the second bracelet. That would be cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's it from us on the Two Fish at the Table podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, baby.